All right, good morning, class. Has everybody been sleeping as well as me?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody sleeping good out here? Okay, good. Yeah, it is a quiet place. Sometimes people who come from cities, they can't sleep in these little, no noise places. But that's how I normally live, so I love it. All right, so this morning what we're going to do is we're going to go over the chakra rulership system for an hour or two. It won't take us that long to get through it. It is used as a supplementary system to the Western system, the chakras being more Eastern. These rulerships come from Jeffrey. They're based upon old Indian rulerships of Sun through Saturn. And then the three outer planets Jeffrey has added on. And so we'll work our way up from these. And, again, and someone may know this a little more better than me, and so you're welcome to speak up. But, chakras are energy vortexes, and there's 7 major chakras that we will work with. There's many variations in different chakras, and I'm not an expert on this other than the main 7, but they're energy centers. And you know how we talked about the physical body actually being the weakest and the spiritual body actually being the strongest? Well, those chakras are going to relate from that etheric body, the emotional, mental, spiritual body. They're going to be those energy vortexes that are just this other side of physical. And so, as we spoke earlier, those who are medical intuitives who can actually see the chakras, that is a very precise way to actually do some intuitive grasping of what imbalances need to be addressed so that they are precluded from coming out on the physical level. And so that's about all that I will say. I'll give you an energetic balancing tidbit. I am familiar with a couple of medical intuitives who it's a common thing that different facilitators such as myself have ran into. There are frequencies to balance the chakras on our AIM program. And so medical intuitives will come up to participants on AIM and they'll go, what are you doing? Your chakras are so lined up, they're so in balance. And so medical intuitives can actually see how the chakras rebalance themselves with the energetic balancing.
Okay.
And so we will have people come on to our program because of that. So, sorry, a little side trip that popped into my head. So, as we start working with the chakras, we're just going to start with the root chakra, all right? And so, I also wanted to tell you, you have a whole section in your manual on the chakras, okay? And I have one page in there that is just, I've put the chakra system up in the corner and I've left it blank. A lot of times when I do health and wellness readings, I would tell you to make this your master copy if you want, and make copies of this. And so then as you work with clients, start working with their stressful aspects to see how it correlates to the chakra. You can work with the non-stressful aspects. I will always lay out some of the major aspects on my sheet of chakras just to start to give me some indicators. And, common ones is if you have one chakra in which there's multiple aspects going on, especially compared to other chakras, you can then know that that chakra is, stressed. It's got some, issues going on. And so you can then also look to see if how it's correlated in your Western astrology system. So I just gave you all a little chakra worksheet in your manual that you can make copies of and work with clients if you want to yourself. Okay. So when we start working with the 3 chakras, or the root chakra, there are 3 rulerships to this: Pluto, Uranus, and Saturn. And of course, the root chakra is the source of energy for us that then allows us to be alive, as I look at it. I don't look at any of the chakras as having more or less any, negativity to them. I don't look at one chakra being better than the other chakra. I look at the colors of a rainbow. You like all the colors in the rainbow. And so that's how I look at all the chakras. And so for me to have a good, strong root chakra means that you can be in your body and you can function in your body. Now, the root chakra has the sound that will come from the root chakra when you meditate is the bumblebee. And if any of you have been close to any flies or bees and you feel that low vibration, Jeffrey's correlated that to feeling like almost the earth moving, etc. But this triple rulership of the root chakra, what it is Saturn rules the outer core. Uranus rules the middle core. And then Pluto rules the central core. And so Saturn and Uranus cover over Pluto. And so for most of us, this root chakra will lie dormant. And so Saturn, remember how Saturn has this energy to crystallize everything? Saturn will come over this root chakra and it'll kind of get this covering over it that then just keeps it enclosed, the dormancy that will go through. And what will happen as we start to really awaken in our body, or we start to awaken Kundalini energy, is this Saturn core starts to crack. And like if you would look at, Jeffrey uses the symbology of the ground starting to break apart with fissures, like an earthquake and then lava coming up. Saturn is that outer core with the fissures that are breaking up. And Uranus is that energy, the lava that starts coming out through the cracks. All right? And so the correlation of Saturn to the root chakra, and this will really work probably for a lot of people in the consensus world, and this will also work for many in our westernized society, because when it comes to nutrition, our diet is so processed, so much cooked foods. Again, we don't move it through that whole GI tract. We don't have good elimination systems. We can be that anal retentive society. We can find also the sit-down society, because we don't exercise. We sit so much in our modern world. And that's why this root chakra can so many times just be dormant from inactivity. And so with Saturn rulership of that root chakra, the root chakra will also rule anything that goes below the lower extremities. So in the Eastern chakra system, the root chakra will rule anything from from the pelvis, the thighs, the calves, the knees, the feet, anything in the lower extremities will have some correlations to the root chakra. The root chakra will rule, again, these elimination patterns with Saturn that get so frozen. So when somebody starts correcting their diet, they will naturally, as you correct those elimination processes, you will naturally start to slowly activate the root chakra. You can also activate the root chakra through meditation, through actively trying to evolve your soul, through meditation, through psychological work, through various types of self-growth. One of the things that can happen is you can activate that root chakra. Now, what I've read in Jeffrey's materials is that at the base of, in your Gray's Anatomy, at the base of the vertebrae, there is this little bump that sticks out, and it actually, in the Gray's Pocket Anatomies, it doesn't really have a name. That is called the Kundalini gland. There actually is a Kundalini gland. And when we start to spiritualize our life, that gland can become activated and start its secretions. And it's very important to understand, and this is really going to relate to Uranus being the inner core of this root chakra. When we start to activate our life and the Kundalini starts to raise up the chakras, Kundalini's purpose is to purify impurities. Its purpose is to go to the shadow, to go to the darkness, to go to wherever there is an imbalance and address it, to purify it, to bring the shadow into the light. For most of us, it's not a very comfortable feeling. If we've had, look at how Saturn and Uranus just relate in evolutionary astrology. Uranus, that individuated unconsciousness, Saturn, the individuated consciousness, and Saturn tries to suppress, and Uranus pushes it out. You can see that same type of energy in the root chakra. Saturn tries to hold that core together. It tries to hold it very dense, dark, compressed, okay, hold it dormant. Uranus is trying to break it open. Uranus, the part of the soul that just wants to decondition.
Would you clarify that part about the Kundalini gland? Is that the inner core of the root chakra, Pluto, or outside of that?
Outside of it. It's outside. It's at the base. It's at the base of the spinal column.
Okay, because you referred to Uranus as the inner core as well as Pluto.
Yeah, Uranus, well, okay, thank you. Uranus is, if I want to say it correctly, Uranus would be the middle core of the root chakra. Yes, yes. But the root chakra getting activated, starting to vibrate, will then activate the Kundalini gland, which rests out beside it, behind it, at the base of the spinal column. And then it will start to go up that spinal cord. Energetically, I'm sure there's probably a physiological substance that actually starts to rise up the spinal cord. But Uranus then, again, is similar to this Kundalini energy that when the root chakra gets activated, that's just trying to address anything that we need to address in our life. Be it something that's literally the physical body, and some people are sensitive enough to feel this in the physical body, or be it emotional, mental, or spiritual bodies. So its purpose is to seek out impurities and address them, purify. And so what will typically happen when many people start to do what they call, Kundalini work, trying to activate this root chakra, and the root chakra always gets combined with the sacral chakra, the sexual chakra, which sits a couple of inches above the root chakra. And so what does Kundalini energy do when it starts to rise? It's going to run into the sacral chakra next. And so people will confuse this with sexual energy. And so the other thing that will happen is people will, again, I'm trying to purify my life, I'm trying to meditate, I'm trying to be holy. Why do I have all this SHIT going on, so to speak?
SEX.
And SEX. Here I am, trying to be spiritual, and I got all these lower chakra things going on that I don't want to deal with. Well, you've got to be grounded in that kind of stuff, and you've got to address the impurities to really evolve the soul. And so that's what this Uranus middle layer is going to do, and then Pluto, the core, is going to come in, and just when those of us who are evolutionary astrologers and working with Pluto, representative of the soul, how many of us are really in touch with our soul? Most of the time, that soul is just lying there, unconscious, dormant. We're running around in the ego, not really getting that core soul depth of ourself. And so, any of you who do your visualization practices, that root chakra is what's going to ground you in the body, but then also allow you to really rise up the chakra system. And so, anyway, I guess as a Pluto person, I just want to advocate the root chakra. Pam?
One quick thing.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I always learned from my teachers from India were that always the chakras work in relationship to. So you can't have intense spirituality seventh chakra without intense root chakra. They all work in tandem. Like it's a big figure eight. And they all,
Yes.
so they don't go, they're all in relationship too. So
Yes.
they all intense sexuality, intense spirituality. They all just kind of move back and forth.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And you will see in the little thing, you'll see all the figure eights going up and down in this little graph that was made. Okay? Yep. And so this root chakra then on a physiological level will work with the muscles and the nerves and the circulation patterns of all those lower extremities. It will work with the elimination patterns. With Saturn, it's going to have a direct correlation to the anal canal and our ability to eliminate. And so as we've been having some of our interesting discussions about constipation, and diarrhea, and just really making the elimination process of that lower area, function better. It's a natural way to just really, get in touch with the root chakra. So if you look to, if you can see stressful aspects to Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto, can show some correlations to this root chakra, and therefore correlations to issues with the elimination, issues with the lower body physically. Okay, understand? Make sense in regards to this? And so, just to repeat this again, Saturn tries to keep that root chakra dormant, tries to keep Kundalini dormant, tries to suppress, tries to keep us in consensus state. Uranus is the liberator, and Pluto's the core. And Pluto itself will relate to that Kundalini energy. And so then, as we move up, then the next chakra is what we know as the sacral chakra. And this one is co-ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. And the sound of this chakra is the flute when you meditate. And this sacral chakra, this is all of the genital area. This rules the whole genital area. So if you're going to have any hormonal imbalances, if you're going to have any sexuality issues, if you're going to have anything to do with those issues in men or women, that chakra can be involved with it. And so that one's pretty easy to understand. One of the things that Jeffrey will always say is, because people will ask, well, how does Jupiter and Neptune relate to this sacral chakra? And he says, just look at how all of the distortions of sexuality we have going on the planet. Look at the United States, where we glamorize all of the sexuality. The Playgirls, the Playboy magazines, the Hollywood, all of the perfect body, the Neptunian fantasies, the Jupiter exaggerations. Okay? You can start to see where all of this starts to come in. Now, when we raise the Kundalini up the spine and up the chakra system, it will naturally activate the sexuality area. And as we know with our human consciousness or our human species, sexuality is a natural part of life. We evolved into the two genders because it allowed us to evolve the immune system faster to survive as a species. But sexuality is a natural function. As a matter of fact, one of the last separating desires that will be released is the sexual desire. And only approximately the top 2% of evolved souls on the planet have naturally exhausted the separating desire. So this whole, sacral chakra, again, it is something that is natural, it is something that is normal, it is something that is a normal part of life. Because we have, through human-made conditioning, most commonly known as religions, because through this we have suppressed the natural sexual desire, this separation of spirit and flesh. We are either trying to totally ignore this sacral chakra, or we're trying to over-glamorize it. And so, you know, when the hormones start developing in teenagers and they move through puberty, you know, it can whack them out. It can, you know, they can, you know, life becomes full of obsession with this area of life. And so, again, it's understanding it's a natural part of life. And I personally don't think we have very good education or rituals with children moving into the whole sexuality thing. I mean, I'm an advocate of when the hormones start producing, you need to have taught the children about sexuality and about birth control by then. Trying to get them to go through this abstinence thing in today's world. That's why we have a Republican vice presidential candidate with a daughter in the news. Maureen?
Yeah, I was just going to say that this Sarah does not believe in sex education in schools, and I hope that they start talking about that instead of just the fact that she's pregnant, but
Right.
talk about that when kids are not educated, that's why these things happen.
Exactly. Thank you. Yep, exactly. Totally. So stay tuned. We'll see. We're missing the news this week. And that could be a good thing. But yeah, so this whole, you know, sacral chakra, when somebody comes to you as a client and they're having hormonal issues, when they're having, you know, all kinds of manifestations of imbalances that would be related to sexuality, you could start to look to aspects to Jupiter and Neptune and see if something starts to show up, either by sign and house position or via aspects. You know, and especially when any of these, you will see these three lower chakras have co-rulers. And so whenever you see any of these co-rulers of a chakra in harsh aspects to each other, that can also be an indicator of that area of the body just being in stress, being susceptible to the manifestation of imbalances. You know how the understanding or theory goes that I've heard from Jeffrey's work that it just was light bulbs for me. It made so much sense that for me it's a understanding that I agree with. And you know, we had tens of thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years, where we would observe women being magical. They grew the fat bellies and gave birth, created life. That's how we got the first goddess. Okay, so I've just kind of looked at it as a natural shifting that went to an extreme, and we get to see how we come back and balance this matriarchal, patriarchal energy. But when we started recognizing that it took the biological act of both genders, that men had a role in creating babies, it created this subtle but interesting transition. You know, from Jeffrey's memories, he said this happened somewhere between, somewhere around 6500 to 7500 BC in time was where this happened. And the Capricorn sub-age of the age of Cancer. And so there was a time period for about 500 years when men and women recognized that they were co-creators of babies. But then all of a sudden this natural sexuality of we had the urge, we would engage in it, started shifting because all of a sudden man had to know who he had sex with, to know who his children were. So there was this gradual but subtle shifting from maternal communal groups to the individual paternal group. You go back far enough, family units were known through the female lineage. And this shifted then to go through the male lineage. But all of a sudden we had to know, who our kids were. So there was this subtle shifting from controlling the sexuality and who had sex with who. And this is, my woman to have my baby. So we started controlling the sexuality, and this very subtly shifted into all other areas of life. We started controlling, the land, the animals, the kids, and how I like to say it, we created the sky gods. That was the beginning of a lot of these sexual distortions, and then we created the religions. Humans created religion. And as we created those religions, most of them were based upon this control of sexuality. The most common way we know it, the Garden of Eden myth, the separation of spirit and flesh. And if you wanted to be spiritual, you could not. You had to suppress the flesh. You had to ignore the flesh. How I also like to say it is woman became Eve, became flesh, became sin. Man became Adam, became saint, became perfect. You see the inequality. And so I'm giving you a broader answer than what you asked for, Maureen. But, as religions rose up, created by humans, they were basically used as a function to control. Before that, before we knew what created babies, we existed very naturally in natural law, and we were fused with spirituality. We saw source energy in everything. We saw it in the humans, we saw it in the animals, we saw it in the plants, we saw it in nature itself. And so as the human religions rose up and created all of these control issues over sexuality, they also created control over the animal kingdom, the vegetative kingdom, the mineral kingdom. They created control over nature itself. And as they tried to control this sexuality and say, you can only do it under ABC conditions, in other words, procreation, and you can only do it with, XYZ people, it suppressed natural sexuality. And when you suppress something that is natural, it just becomes distorted. So the deeper meaning of this Jupiter-Neptune ruling the sacral chakra is to re-spiritualize sexuality. And so again, people will confuse Kundalini with sexuality. The sexual energy is a most natural way to know source energy. And so the deeper purpose of this Kundalini energy as it encounters the sacral chakra is to move us beyond all of the suppressions of the root chakra and to just energetically vibrate, knowing, to experience source energy, to experience it physiologically in the body. But for instance, when we look at Tantra and we look at Western versus Eastern Tantra, Western Tantra, in its glamorizations of sexuality, thinks sexuality is the main purpose. In Eastern Tantra, sexuality was just the tool to activate the vibration of spiritual energy. It was not the end goal. It was the mechanism to move through it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Is that answering your question, Maureen?
Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else? Questions on this subject? In regards to this?
Kim,
Yes?
I wondered if you could just repeat again what you said about the Garden of Eden. I didn't get it.
The Garden of Eden myth is the most common way in which we know this separation of spirit and flesh conditioning. and is portrayed as woman, Eve, being temptation, tempting man with the senses. And men, of course, are supposed to be spirit, while woman is flesh. And so the man as spirit is supposed to deny this. Well, neither men nor women can deny this natural biological urge, this natural need to sexually express themselves. So you can see all the judgments that started, all the conditionings, all the suppressions. And speaking of sexuality on a physiological level, what do we read in all of our little studies these days? It's the use it or lose it syndrome, especially for men. If they want to have a healthy prostate, ejaculation, and whatever your choice of form is. But men who are sexually active are healthier. Women who are sexually active are healthier. When there was healthy sexuality on the planet, we didn't have to resort down, we weren't so angry. And we didn't draw so many lines in the sand. When we did not suppress sexuality, the suppression of sexuality has led to a lot of what we would call the sexual abuses, the rapes. And so, this is some of the history behind this sacral chakra. All right? And so, I might have someone on the tape asking, thinking about this. Well, okay, what are we supposed to do? Go back to, group sex?
Sure, why not?
We tried that.
Well, as I look at it from the broader picture of the coming Aquarian age, we will again go to a communal unit. And it's not that the individual family unit will disappear. It won't. But because we've had so many thousands of years of suppression of sexuality, as it comes out of the closet again, and we see it coming out of the closet through the gay rights movement most currently at this point, but as we look at this coming Aquarian age, there can be a communal unit within a family that is defined as more than one man, one woman. Now, anytime you get more than two people involved in an intimate relationship, it becomes quite emotionally, mentally complicated quite fast. Yes, Chris?
I was just going to say that we're already starting to see experimentation in that area, which would make perfect sense, because we're going to have to get the model right.
Yes.
So that it works
Yes.
in a proactive fashion. But there's lots of cases now where there's families based on, two men, one woman.
Vice versa.
Yeah, and even bigger numbers than that.
Yes.
We all watch Oprah.
Yes.
So, okay. Well, I watch Oprah because I think she's a great consensus.
Yeah, she is a
transformer.
good bridge.
So she's had some of that stuff on, and then I've read of it in, different magazines and things like that. So I think it's really fascinating. I think it absolutely ties
Yeah.
in with what you're saying. And come on, Aquarius.
And it
Let's
pushes
get there.
it pushes that sacral chakra button, not to mention pushing a few of the other chakras. Maureen and
Yes, I think that it's something like only 50% of families in this country are the old-fashioned man and woman type. Yeah.
yeah. A few more comments that I want to say on this. Again, because there's been such suppression of it, there will be a boomerang that comes out, not just in the distortion of the rapes and the murders and the incest. It will also, again, then come out with experimentation of various sexual freedoms, of various sexual ways. Now, if you also want to look at this from an evolutionary biological level, the human species is not monogamous biologically. And there was a reason for this. All men, all women have a dual desire nature sexually. They have a desire to be wild, and they have a desire to be committed. The desire to be wild will relate to the diversification of the gene pool in order for the species to survive. And if you look at it historically, when women had multiple sex partners, it was there's within the male sperm there's what's known as killer sperm. The strongest sperm survives when multiple sperms are in the vagina or in the uterus. And then the desire to commit will relate also to the survival of the species and just the ability for the young mammal, the baby infant, to be able to survive. We survived better when we lived in a group. What I've read up on this is from observation of evolutionary biology historically. The monogamous unit would normally last about 4 years. It would last until the time that the child was ready to be weaned from the breast. And then the other things would start to evolve. Now, I also have a theory, and I've heard this one from Jeffrey too. While we are not biologically monogamous as a species, because we have developed the cerebral cortex, because we have now learned to develop all of these emotions, all of these thoughts, all of these broader understandings, human consciousness as a species is slowly but gradually working its way through towards monogamy. Pam?
Well, I do have friends that are in group marriages, and I just think it's complicated because it's really easy to say, because we have emotions, and I mean, putting a Scorpio in that situation is really complicated. It's not simple. That's all I mean. I think that it's easy for people, people get connected sexually. It's an emotional bond. Emotionally, we can be monogamous because of certain things. It's just complicated. That's all I mean. I think some people are put together more to be detached and go from person to person. Some people aren't, and all of that needs to be supported. I certainly know that friends of mine that have had long-time marriages, monogamous marriages, people think, oh, well, you're repressed, and then I have friends, but I just think it's complicated it's complex. And that needs to be
In
on
the
it.
Aquarian age, it's kind of going with that symbol of unity and diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And so to each his own.
Sure.
And the less we judge and the more we discern, the faster we evolve.
Uh-huh.
And so, Jess?
I just want you to clarify something. I'm a little confused by a couple things you said. You were talking about how as we move into the Aquarian age, we're going to see a lot more group family dynamics.
We'll see multiple choices of family dynamics.
Okay, so
The individual family dynamic, one man, one woman, won't go away because it's the natural unit in the species, the two genders.
okay, so but then also as you were talking about that biologically we're not a monogamous species, but we're moving into that direction evolutionarily as our consciousness changes.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two very different things.
Yes.
So where's the
And evolution takes place over long periods of time.
Okay. Okay. So
We're not going to snap our fingers and find ourselves monogamous as a species in 200 years or 2,000 years.
I
No.
felt like you had started to say something about once you start adding more than two people in the relationship,
Yes.
it becomes very emotional and very. Were you going to continue to add anything to that, or was that all you?
Just to basically expand upon it, well, yes. Let me add on what I look at. If we look at most of our souls historically through our past lives, and let's just say, 6,000 years of sexual distortions. We've created a lot of karmic situations with various partners. That's still going to take us a few more lifetimes to come through and balance out karmically. And so as we move into these Aquarian alternatives in love units, let's call it, all this past life karma starts to come up into it and get involved and makes it quite complicated. And so to then look at this utopian ideal that many of our Aquarians will look at and go, but we should be able to love everybody, be sexual with everybody, and we should be able to just move beyond the jealousies and the possessiveness that Scorpio energy brings up. Yes, you can see where that is true on a theoretical level, but most of us have got a lot of karma that we've got to evolve through before we can ever get to that point. And before we can evolve to that point on a natural, organic way. Because what you can sometimes, if you look back to the 60s and all this community stuff that went on for a while, and everybody was just going to love everybody, and everybody's going to have sex with everybody, and there wasn't going to be any jealousy, guess what broke the communal units apart? There is a lot of self-love you've got to work through before you can get beyond these issues that we call quote-unquote negative emotions. Yeah, and there's there's karma to be worked through. And so some people are going to work through the karma as that individual unit, one man, one woman. Some people are going to work through it in all of these alternative units of multiple choices, but I come back to this whole thing, the less we judge and the more we discern, the faster we evolve.
Are we going to see, because of the degree of distortion and karma that people have, are you going to see a lot of that coming out in those like group community relationship situations any more so than you do in a
Same, you'll see it in the individual unit as much as you see it in the group unit.
So I just had a very brief comment. Of course, I'm a child of the 60s, ex-hippie. So I actually did live the communal thing. And you're absolutely right, Kim Marie. The model was very idealistic, very Neptunian. The Pluto and Leos really thought they could do it. But interestingly, on an anecdotal, personal basis, for about 2 to 3 years, my family, my core nuclear family, and another nuclear family, we lived together in one house, and we shared everything. And there was a real safety created in that unit. I personally resonate with the idea of a community. There was a lot of touch, there was a lot of affection, but there was no sex. Like we didn't do the multiple sexual partner thing. So we raised 4 children together by everything was done sort of like these how to write colony type things. It's really, I think, that those people, we separated, but those people I love them.
Well, I'm sure she's not the first one who said it, but Hillary, remember when she made that comment? It takes a village to raise a child. I mean, we are, we are a relationship species.
Oh, it was great. Like we were young women, and so we had this really great system for cooking. So neither one of us ever felt overwhelmed with the cooking and the clean. We cleaned together, and the boys did all the renovations together, and the kids grew up as brothers and sisters.
Oh, but I will draw attention to the distinction that you made. You lived in a communal unit.
Yeah.
With multiple individual family units.
Yeah.
But the sexuality was not communal.
No.
And the moment you introduce the sexuality into the equation, it makes it very complicated and very fast.
Yeah.
And so because sexuality is a natural way that we address this emotional body. that we work our way through all of these emotions. And so, and again, I'm not here advocating there's one right, one wrong. You know, there's many ways, there's many paths to God, there's many paths to Goddess, there's many paths to exhaust the separating desires. Excuse me, Jessie, another one?
I have two questions, actually. I see in my generation, I see two things happening pretty consistently.
Pluto and Libra, let's
Yeah.
identify your generation.
There's a lot of divorce, obviously, and there's a lot of young children involved, and so I'm seeing, divorces happening when the children are 5 and under in a lot of situations. And those children end up being raised essentially by the time they're probably 8 or 9 by 4 families, really, because they have both biological parents, their new partners, and all the extended family. So is that almost an extension or kind of
Yes.
starting
Yes.
evolutionarily? So it's not, when we look at
Yep.
this broken home situation, it's not necessarily
Yep.
a bad thing.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And, one of the comments that Jeffrey would make about the Pluto and Leo generation, Leo children, is that a lot of the Pluto and Leos would end up, being involved with children who were not biologically theirs, but karmically theirs. I think we can move that through all of the generations, really. And you know what? Well, our son, and we've got a 12-year-old turning 13, moving into puberty, so we're dealing with some of his individual karmic issues, but this is a little boy who has, been raised, like you said, with multiple family units, with multiple grandparents, and he does not differentiate between his biological versus non-biological grandparents. It's just, it doesn't have to be a bad thing to raise children that way. It can be a good thing. So the Pluto and Libra generation can, actually bring up some of these little Pluto in Scorpio, Pluto in Sag, most likely, well, yeah, Pluto in Sag, Pluto in Capricorn souls that can just learn to be, especially those Pluto in Sag, to be more free-spirited, to get past Sag, some of these religious suppressions. One more question?
My next question is, the other thing that I'm seeing is the exact opposite. I feel like half of my generation is the born-again, stay-at-home mom. I went to a wedding this weekend, and I would say 90% of the people there are my age. They all have kids, and at least 50% of them are stay-at-home moms. And it's pretty consistent across the board, when I go back to Arizona as well, and I look around, a lot of them are stay-at-home moms, and, dad brings home the paycheck. So I was wondering what you have to say.
That's pretty localized. I think it's very geographical.
It's
in a lot of
not
sense.
not necessarily, because the other part that I was going to say, the other part of this Pluto and Libra generation is they're also coming along trying to do what they did what the Pluto and Leos did in the 60s, and that is to do the communal unit. The Pluto and Libra generation, Libra's diversity. The Pluto and Libra generation, really can be a generation that shows us all the examples of sexuality from one end of it to the other. Even the Pluto and Libra generation going to that Aquarian polarity who says, I'm going to be celibate. And I'm going to, and they can be celibate, many of them, because this relationship stuff, Libra, is just too painful. All the way to the communal unit, where you can have the Pluto and Libras who go, I'm just going to love everybody. And the question is if we're loving everybody, Aries polarity, are we denying our own needs in the communal unit? And are we denying our own needs as they go up? So the Pluto and Libra generation is going to bring through many types of sexual units.
No, I will say that what I'm seeing with a lot of the stay-at-home moms is that they had a career because we're having babies later too. We're not starting to have babies till
Yes.
28, 30, 32.
Yes.
And they're in their career for a fairly large chunk of time. When they decide to have kids, they're pretty financially stable. And anyone that I know that's a stay-at-home mom is doing it because they don't like the way society is right now, and they want a stronger family unit, but they also want their kids to be growing up playing outside, playing with toys, not playing in front of the TV, not, kind of the electronic babysitter that happens when both parents are working. They're
Yes.
trying to get away from that. So, I don't know, but it was just shocking to me to see how many, when I was put in an environment where the majority were my age, and it was people, we had people from 6 or 7 states in another country at the wedding, and yet, and I see the same thing in Arizona as well with at least my friends. So I was curious just what you had to say.
Pluto and Libra, it's going to be across the board. The comment about your generation and half of them are divorced, understand that in the United States, half of marriages end in divorce. That's not, it's been pretty much right around that 50%, give or take 5 points either direction. It's been a pretty common statistic in the United States for a period of time. So it's multi-generational that half of marriages end in divorce. I mean, basically what we're finding is most natural for us as a human species is what we would call serial monogamy. That's the biggie, is serial monogamy. But this Pluto and Libra generation, they're going to be everything from that traditional, or again, the celibacy to the communal, to the traditional, to all kinds of, I think that this generation is bringing in a lot of this beginning Aquarian age. Let's try the sexual unit that works for us. Mm-hmm.
So this aspect of partnership is a big part of my work as an astrologer, and I'm going to be teaching a lot of workshops, probably for many years in this subject, and that's the whole reason that we have a birth chart. And I think the human species is so special because there's no such thing as one model of relationship. So to say we're moving towards this, or I don't believe any of that. I think that what we're moving towards is acknowledgement of the chart and the map and the code of our soul, and that all you need to do is look there, and you can see, is multiple partnership really most appealing for me? Is monogamy most appealing at this phase of my life, at this phase of my life? It's all there in the chart. So the work that I'm trying to do and excite people about is to look at that map and to really honor what it says. And most of the time people are fighting against it in some way. And it could be anyway. Maybe their community is more open, but they're they have maybe a lot of Cancer or Capricorn in their chart, and they want more monogamous. They want a family, or the more typical might be, having that model where it is supposed to be monogamous, and they have Venus in Gemini and Mars in Sag, and they just want to play and explore, And once you can get in there and kind of recognize that, and also the internal struggles that people might feel during different phases of life, like progressed moon phases, that are very different than how they their chart is more configured. So I think the more we get into helping people be confident and honor what's in their birth chart, then they will naturally attract a partner that balances that, or multiple partners that balance that. And I lived in San Francisco for a couple of years, so I know how far this Pluto and Libra generation is going, and they're also the Neptune and Sag. So there's definitely extremism, and there's the whole thing, from full-on play party, open sexuality, to kissing parties where it isn't sexual but it's kissing. There's a whole gamut.
The whole thing.
And with the polyamorous community, especially in that area, they're really working on playing with all these different possible ways, like you said, of really exploring relationship, Pluto and Libra.
And what we will find following that Pluto and Libra, Neptune and Sag, is Pluto and Scorpio, Neptune and Capricorn. So this whole issue, we're just beginning discussion, which we could discuss forever. There's going to be so many multiple variations that come out of it. But it is the whole thing that Libra represents and that Aquarius represents. It's the whole unity and diversity. The less we judge, the more we discern, the faster we evolve. So that was the sacral chakra. But anyway, just to get back to physiology, that the whole physical part of it. If you're gonna, you can look to stressful aspects to Jupiter and to Neptune and start wondering if somebody has issues with the ovaries or the uterus or the prostate or that whole area that starts to take place, the hormones of the genitals with that. And other questions? Have we covered this one enough? More than we thought? Okay. So then as we move up to the next chakra, we're moving up to the navel chakra. And the sound of this chakra in meditation is the harp. And it is co-ruled by Mars and Pluto. And this is also known as the will chakra. It is what we know as the center of gravity for most people. Most people, Chris?
In pranic healing, the solar plexus chakra.
Yes.
And you Americans, you're all SP people.
What?
Yay!
All SP, solar plexus chakra.
Manifestors.
Yes. Yes. It's known as the ego chakra.
The navel one?
Yes. The will. Think of Mars. Think of how Mars relates to the actions and the desires, the conscious desires, the ego's desires. And the Pluto co-rulership in there, the Pluto co-rulership is trying to align, personal will with higher will. Trying to shift the ego, trying to shift the willpower from ego to soul. But this whole area on, a physiological level will rule all of these organs in the midsection, the stomach, the kidneys, all of this, the duodenum, all of these organs that exist right here in this sacral area. And so, from the Eastern chakra system, if you're having, issues in this area, the stomach issues, you can also look to the aspects or the situations with Mars and Pluto, the whole issue of the will. Are you overexerting the will? Are you underexerting the will? You can look to those types of extremes. And so when you're looking at that with the whole perspective of, the ego and emotions that can also be in the stomach as well as the heart, okay, then you can look at some of these organs in this area of the body becoming out of balance. When will is out of balance, ego's out of balance. Maureen, can somebody twist that around for her?
Yes, I can understand how Mars and Pluto would have to do with the will, but what's confusing a little is that I'm so used to thinking of stomach with more moon.
Moon.
Yeah.
Yes. And so the common example that Jeffrey has given is when you have somebody in which you don't see, you can instead of looking for just the moon being involved in those aspects of the stomach, you can look to Mars and Pluto. And you can look to, let's just say, a harsh aspect between Mars and the moon, or Mars and Pluto, or a harsh aspect between Mars and Pluto themselves. It'll start to come in that area. I mean, if you think about it, Maureen, from the perspective of getting in your own body, okay, when you're starting to, when you want to assert your will, when you're wanting to do something, and let's say it's something you've never done before, and so it's a little scary, it's a little fearful, where do we get the flutters? In the stomach. Where do we get upset? In the stomach. Where do we get indigestion? In the stomach. Solar plexus. Solar plexus is a better word than the stomach. Okay, so can you starting to see it? Can you understand that?
So I would think that it would be co-ruled by all three of them.
Well, in your Western system, it's ruled by the moon. In your Eastern system, it's ruled by Mars and Pluto. Okay? Go back to thinking of Mars as the planet of action, the planet of acting upon the desires of the soul. If you don't desire something, you don't make any effort to go in that direction. If it's something that you desire, you energize it, and you consciously energize it. And you take action to try and create that desire. That's the Mars part. And that's how Mars can come into this solar plexus we know as the will. And Chris?
Maybe just a comment, and of course, the moon is representative of our ego. So that's where the connection comes in, because Mars is what takes the ego impulse and does it.
There we go.
And of course, Pluto is the soul, ego manifestation, the moon.
What does moon represent?
The ego,
Oh.
according to EA.
So that whole solar plexus area then, and the organs around there, can also be looked at through stressful aspects to Mars and Pluto, and all the various combinations thereof. Okay? Moving on, then we move into the heart chakra, and the heart chakra is known in meditation. The sound is the gong or the bell. The heart chakra in the Eastern system, ruled by Venus. And it rules all the things that happen in the upper area of the chest. The lungs, the heart, the chest, the diaphragm, the breathing, all of the upper emotions that'll come along. You see how we are kind of moving from what we would know as the solar plexus and the lower emotional body to a higher or upper emotional body. I'm not saying one's better than the other, just noticing the difference on a energetic level with that. And so you saw where we could always see in the Western system, when we worked with the heart, we saw the sun. When we worked with breath, we saw Uranus, we saw Mercury. In the Eastern system, this is where Venus starts to come in. And we can sometimes see stressful aspects to Venus that will work their way through it. I remember I saw a chart, I was working with a chart one time this summer, and I'm not going to remember any specifics, but they had like 5 or 6 stressful aspects to Venus. And so, it was kind of like you need to just be really careful nutritionally with taking care of your heart. Venus ruling the veins and the capillaries, okay, and white blood cells. It was kind of like you need to really work to make sure that you keep your circulation system open so that the heart functions well. You can see the heart as an organ in that area of the chakras. And we can very much easily relate to the Libra side of Venus being the giving and receiving of love. That relativity aspect of Venus, how we relate to others. And you can see how that can come in there with the heart. Kim?
Would that have anything to do with self-love too? I mean,
Totally, totally.
wouldn't that be
If you're
where it
gonna
would
be moving-
start?
Pardon?
I said, kind of, wouldn't that be where it would start?
Yes, and that would be the Taurus side of Venus. You know, when you're moving up the spine, you know, and you're moving into the heart chakra, that chakra opens up when you learn how to love yourself. Totally. Yep. You know, and you can also just look at it, you know, sometimes when we're really, you know, a broken heart, you know, and we've had a bad relationship breakup, you can see that in there. But yeah, totally. I have South Node in Taurus, and so for me, Venus has always, I've really gotten that Venus self-love thing that you've got to be able to do that. And you move it into the heart chakra, yes. Your capacity to love yourself is your capacity to love others. Inner, reflected, outer. Yep. And if you look at this whole area of the heart chakra and how it rules all of those upper organs there, you know, can you see when you have issues going on with the heart, how interrelated the circulation system is to the breath? And how just the big, deep breaths can, you know, open the heart, can balance all of this energy. Totally. Okay, so I better be conscious of time here. Let's have a short little break, and then we'll come back and finish up the chakras and move into some chart practice. This is ruled, of course, by Mercury. And the sound of the throat chakra when we meditate is the wind or the sound of an ocean roar. And so the throat chakra really rules all of these areas that we call the larynx, the thymus, thyroid, tonsils. It's how we communicate. It rules everything in this area. And so this is one of the areas in the Eastern chakra system that balances up with some of the Western chakra system, because Mercury being the tonsils, Mercury being the thyroid, you can see this also in the Eastern system. But again, the chakra rulerships are more of working up the body and working with slicing out a body area, and that chakra vibrates in that area of the body. All right? And so Mercury's pretty easy to understand, correct? And then we move up to the next chakra, which is called the medulla ajna chakra. And Jeffrey would call it a bipolar chakra because it is ruled by the moon and the sun. And so this chakra, the medulla ajna chakra, works with the hypothalamus, the brain, the skull, the eyes and the optic nerves, sinuses, consciousness from the brain stem. And most people want to see this medulla ajna chakra right here in the front. This is the projection. The medulla ajna chakra is really right in that hypothalamus area, which, let me see if I can draw this for everybody, and I'm going to use an old piece of paper so that you can see this. Let me see if I can get to something. Don't mind my drawings, okay? So here's the head of somebody, okay? We want to put that. We think of that third eye chakra right there. This medulla ajna chakra is right in here, okay? And right in here in this part of the brain. And so here's all our brain, okay? Here's the brain stem. Yeah. This is my nose.
Via Jupiter, okay. Really informed.
I do not claim to be an artist. we have all the brain tissue right in here. The hypothalamus exists right in here, and the pituitary is a small thing underneath it, and this is the area where the medulla oblongata rests. It's not at the front of the head where the third eye is. Okay? This makes sense? Everybody understand? And so the medulla oblongata chakra projects forward out to the third eye. Yes. And this is, so this medulla oblongata chakra relates to everything that is, going to cover this whole area from the chin to up to the top where the crown chakra is. And so anything that wants to work, so this can cover a whole big area right in here. Because you can get into not only the hypothalamus, you can also get into the pituitary. Again, the eyes, the sinuses, the nose, the ears, all of this stuff can come from the sun and the moon. And so, sorry, I just dropped it, sweetie. Got it. Got it. Questions? This makes sense? All right, with this? We haven't worked a lot with the fact, although we've talked about it, the fact that the sun and the moon rule the eyes. And so you look for stressful aspects to the sun and the moon, and you can see it affecting the eyes in both the eastern and the western systems. Consciousness also comes from the back of the brainstem, right up high. That's where the seat of consciousness is. The medulla oblongata is what it's called. And this part of the brainstem cannot be operated on. Yes, Maureen?
I don't understand why they say it's a projection of the medulla.
Most people want to put that third eye right up here in the front of the forehead. At the, you've heard about, concentrate on your third eye, this seat of consciousness right here. It's not here. It comes from the back part of the brain. And it's like Jeffrey would always give the example of the movie projector with the lens, and the lens that helps us focus. It's like this is where consciousness is, but then consciousness gets projected forward, gets projected outward. Okay. Oh, the sound for the medulla oblongata chakra is the Om. Om. Jess?
You said that it cannot be operated on, and that it's the center of consciousness. So then, or seat of consciousness. So.
Not talking about the cerebral cortex.
No. I'm talking specifically the area that you're referring to. If there was cancer or a growth or a disease of that area, number one, what would be some ways to see a representation of that then in a birth chart? And number two, what would be a metaphysical implication of that? I mean, what is?
Okay, so let's address the physical part. The physical part could be stressful aspects to the sun, or the moon, or Uranus in your eastern system. The sun and moon as the medulla oblongata chakra. In your western system, Uranus correlates with anything that has to do with the brain. Okay? And so you can look at tumors on that seat of consciousness, and most of the time the therapies are things like chemotherapy and radiation. Because you're involved in energetic balancing, Stephen Lewis puts a lot of energy into finding frequencies to work with the medulla oblongata because it cannot be operated on, and to work with, what's our work about? Expanding consciousness. So he works a lot to have healing frequencies in the brainstem. Metaphysically, think about it. someone who is resisting evolving or expanding in consciousness. So if we have a big blockage that we're not wanting to deal with, we can try and isolate it right here in the brain as a tumor or somewhere, We can try and, I mean, a brain tumor is, to me, would be blockages in consciousness, something we're not wanting to deal with in consciousness, that then condenses into a physiological substance we would call a tumor. You want to go ahead?
I was just going to say then, based on what we know with EB and the emotional frequency that goes along with that, is it suppression of certain emotions over many lifetimes?
It can be suppression of emotions. It can be suppression of various attitudes. It can be suppression of beliefs. Consciousness is going to work with the emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies. Anybody else? Questions? Another thing that works with looking at the medulla ajna chakras and their correlations to the eyes. It's also, you've heard the statement, the eyes are the windows to the soul. Now can you start to see a deeper meaning to that? And again, to repeat, in the Western system, in women, sun left eye, moon right eye. In men, reversed. Sun right eye, moon left eye. Now, because that gets confusing for people, just remember your own self as a gender. Okay, so if you're female, just remember, sun rules my right eye, sun rules my left eye, moon rules my right. Just remember it for yourself. And then you can easily flip it around. Okay. In women, this is the Western now, okay? We're talking Eastern, but this is Western. The sun rules left eye in the woman. Moon rules right eye. And in men, it's the opposite. In men, the moon rules the left eye, the sun rules the right eye. Okay, so now, and let me clarify this whole area for the sun and the moon with the medulla ajna. What this has been describing is the medulla chakra, that people want to make the third eye. Okay? The ajna chakra is here. Okay? And in the Eastern system, the moon is the medulla. Now can you see, remember how Moon and Mars co-ruled the brain stem and the primary brain, and the medulla is ruled by the moon in the Eastern system? And the sun rules the ajna chakra. Then we have the last chakra, the crown chakra, which is on the top of the head. This is the chakra that exists right up here. And that's the higher consciousness. And, very few of us can actually activate this chakra when we're in physical form. It takes a lot of meditation, a lot of evolving of the soul to get there. When we leave the body, we leave through the crown chakra. And in our world of energetic balancing, Stephen Lewis actually has a measurement that he calls consciousness, and it's a scale from 0 to 1,000. If you're familiar, a book, I don't agree with everything in this book, but it does really explain expanding in consciousness pretty well. and that's David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. Lower forms of consciousness try to do it by power, or by force, excuse me. Higher forms of consciousness do it by an inner power. And so when we can look at a photo of someone in human form, when they leave the physical body, when they die, on that consciousness measurement that we can do in that photograph, they have a spike increase in consciousness when they leave the physical body. Understand? And so the crown chakra isn't really going to relate to a lot physiologically, other than when we die and leave the body for most of us. Do you have a question, Sue? Okay. That's what you get for moving your hand. The other thing that I forgot to talk about way down at the bottom, if you look at your little map there, you see the south node and the north node. In the eastern systems, they have specific rulerships to the nervous system. That south node is the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight. The north node is the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest. Okay? Okay, anything else? Now, I've not worked with this very much, but this is another comment that comes from Jeffrey. The polarity of the root chakra is the navel chakra. The polarity of the sacral chakra is the heart chakra. The polarity of the root chakra is the navel chakra, or that solar plexus chakra. Polarity of the sacral chakra is the heart chakra. And then to me, there'd be a natural polarity between the throat chakra and the medulla ajna chakra. Okay. I've made it through my little notes. Questions on anything? Chris?
Not really a question, but just that I think that a really exciting new place that we can start to draw in healing energy is through the sound energy healing, right?
Yeah.
And correlated. And I know a lot of chakra workers use these sounds to, bells to open the heart and so forth. So it's really good to surround yourself with the kind of music that will calm down the chakra that is acting
Oh, that's
up.
a good one. So if you have repeating themes like stressful aspects that you start to see various chakra that's really showing up, then working with music that works with the sounds related to those chakras. Okay? And you've all got this various sounds right there on your little list. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Anybody else? Questions or comments? Okay, so we've got some time to move into some charts. Okay, spend our rest of the morning and afternoon on charts. And something that I would like to do then also is just see if we can notice any, as we work through any charts, any correlations to these chakras in Eastern systems as well. Okay? All right, and so we're going to work with Verdelu's chart, and we've got them in the back of the manual so you can look at his chart. And then we're also going to work with this whole thing that we call transits, progressions, solar arcs, solar returns. And so, in other words, sometimes the timing of the onset of illnesses can come with transits. In other words, we can see things that might be there in the natal chart on a latent or dormant ability or a hereditary ability, basis, and you can see through these, through forecasting when things could possibly be activated. Now, for me, when I work with transits, progressions, solar arcs, the interpretation is the same for the archetype. It's just a different way to do the math. And to just basically explain it for people, the natal chart that was frozen in space-time when you were born, the transits, the planets never stopped circling around. So that's the transits, where the planets actually are in the sky today, and how they're making those angular relationships to your natal chart. And again, you will see I have that cycle of phases and aspects and how to determine those. I included those handouts in the last section of the manual on charts and miscellaneous. Progressions are known as a day for a year, which means for each year of someone's life, you move all the planets one day forward at whatever rate those planets move. So if you have your happy little ephemeris, ephemeris is that book that we look in to see where all the planets are located on any specific date. When you work with progressions, you can start with your natal birth time, and for each year of your life, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you can count the lines and match up where your progressed planets are according to how many years. That's the way to do it manually. Nowadays we have all of our programs that do it for us. So progressions are a day for a year. Major progressions, that's progressing according to the sun. Minor progressions, you use the moon, okay? And for each month of your life, you move forward 1 day's time with minor progressions. So you can do a whole thing with that. That could be a whole subject in and of itself. Solar arcs are a degree for a year.
Just learned those. I think they're wonderful.
Yes. Various people say progressions mean this, solar arcs mean that. I have found from an evolutionary astrology perspective that the interpretations are same. It's the difference in calculating the movement of the planets. And so solar arc's a degree for a year. Solar, sun, arcing, moving. And so that means for each year of your life, all of the planets are moved 1 degree. And so whatever your natal configuration is in your chart, that natal configuration stays the same. Trines to each other, sextiles, squares to each other, they just rotate around the chart with solar arcs. But they will still have their impacts on the natal chart. When I work with solar returns, I do it both ways. I will always I draw up a solar return chart. I have a tendency to draw up a solar return chart for the location of the current solar return. There are those who will draw solar returns to the natal place year after year after year. I am one of those who just draws a solar return for where that person is going to be on that birthday by space and time, physical location. And I'll look at the solar return chart as itself, as a mini chart, and do the whole Pluto formula to it if you want to work with it on a consciousness level. But then I will also do a comparison thing to the natal chart and just, in other words, when I work with solar return charts, if something's really emphasized that's there in the natal chart, I still work with them being related to each other. And, various people have various ways of doing it. And as we talked earlier, we can use many different systems to get to the same space. Bertolu's comment, honey?
Do you
Question?
relocate a solar arc?
Pardon?
Do you relocate the solar arc?
I've not relocated the solar arc. What I have a tendency to do is quad wheels. I'll put the natal chart and I'll put, there's, and then however you want it, transits, progression, solar arcs, or progression, solar arcs, transits. It's just a matter of what you learn to work with. But there are those who will do a progressed chart, and I don't know why you couldn't do a solar arc chart. But I like to just put the wheels around the natal chart and make it relevant to the natal chart. It would just be what variation you're attracted to.
And then you just do a bi-wheel for the solar return and the natal.
I'm not always, you can do a bi-wheel, but I've just put the two charts side by side. Again, I don't try to claim any absolutes.
There are no absolutes.
Got it.
All right, now, Bertaluz, what kind of chart do you want to
Sweetie.
look at? Oh,
Sweetie. Okay, what we're going to do is you've got his natal chart. I'm going to put, he wanted to work with some solar return charts, so I'll put the solar return charts up on paper for us, okay?
yeah, we're going to pull it up on this computer. So you want solar arc for today?
He would, solar return, weren't you wanting to work with solar return? What do you want?
Solar return.
A solar return.
For next year.
For this year.
For this year.
Okay.
But the really interesting stuff is obviously I'm going through some interesting health things this year, but the really interesting is the 1995 and 1993 charts, solar return charts, because 95 was when I collapsed both of my lungs, and 93 was I had a 1.5 inches of bone taken out of my femur, and I was out that whole summer with a metal rod in my leg and having to relearn how to walk. So that happened to be, of course, when I was 15. So it was a Saturn opposition, making sense with the Saturn. But the solar return chart is really, I think, quite telling as well.
Okay, so in 1993, you had 1.5 inches removed from your femur, and you've worked with the solar return charts from 93, 95 as well?
Pulled them up, yeah.
Okay. Where were you in 93 on that solar return, do you know? Remember?
They're up San Jose, California.
Both of those were in San Jose?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That way if somebody wants to look up the charts to study for. And then in 1995, you had both lungs collapse.
Yes.
Was it like a pneumonia relationship? Just happened?
Spontaneous pneumothorax.
Spontaneous?
Your lungs collapsed spontaneously?
Uh-huh.
And were you feeling anything prior to that?
No.
No, it just happened. Okay.
It was
done
pretty
anything?
life and death, as far as I knew. It was a near-death experience,
Oh, I'm
the
sure it
first
was.
one.
Yeah.
I couldn't breathe, and I had a stabbing pain in my chest for hours. And it was pretty powerful. And the other surgery occurred because when I was 2, I guess probably near my Mars return, I had broken my femur slipping on a ball. And when I was 14, the doctors realized that that my hips were misaligned, and so we had to, do something about that because I was still growing. And so that's when we decided to take the 1.5 inches of bone out of my left femur so that my hips would be balanced again. And so that was that decision then.
Okay.
When you had the lung collapse, or both lungs collapse, had you done anything really physical prior to that?
Really physical? How do you mean? Exercise? Or what do you mean?
Yeah, exercise or
Prior to it?
fairly close to it or leading up to it at all? I mean, were you a very physically active child, or?
I wasn't overly physically. See, after I had the leg thing, I had been swimming. I swam every summer, and then I think the summer before that happened, I had swum, and I didn't do sports or anything at school, but I wasn't.
I think she meant like the 24 hours before they
No.
collapsed.
Yeah, had you gone and done anything? And did you have any history of asthma or anything? No?
Don't try to find a logical. It was really spontaneous. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really kind of somatically initiated.
And so doctors didn't diagnose any germs or
Spontaneous
virus,
pneumothorax.
bacteria?
That's what's called spontaneous pneumothorax.
Spontaneous what?
Pneumothorax, lung
Pneumo-
collapse.
Okay. All right.
It's not uncommon. I mean, it's not
Mm-hmm.
common, but it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about the size of the lung capacity to the size of the body, and tends to happen in 18 to 30-year-old males.
Wow. 18 to 30-year-old males. That's interesting.
Usually when you're taller and thinner. I'm not that tall. I never have been, but it's just the thing where the lung needs negative pressure to stay inflated, and if your torso is not proportioned well enough, then you could have a spontaneous collapse because the pressure goes positive into the lung. So that's what happened. And sometimes people will experience that and they won't even know it because the lungs will repair themselves. But mine didn't repair. So then I had surgery.
And what type of surgery did this entail?
What do you call it? Arthroscopic, the one with the camera. They went in there and basically stapled my lungs back together. I had a tube in my chest draining fluid for about 10 days,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't heal itself like we were hoping. So then the only option was to have surgery, and it was a new surgery at the time, and I was very blessed to have it.
And stapled your lungs? How? They opened the lungs back, inflated the lungs back up, and then stapled them open until you could breathe on your own?
Yeah, and the second one collapsed like 6 weeks later. Yeah.
So you went through it twice.
I went for my checkup the day after Christmas, and I was in the doctor's office, and I was waiting for the doctor to check my x-ray, and while I was in the doctor's office, I started to feel a really intense pain in my chest again. Having the surgery that I had, I couldn't have my lung collapse by itself again. It wouldn't happen. It could get punctured, of course, but it wouldn't spontaneously collapse. So while I was in the doctor's office waiting for this checkup, I started to feel a very similar pain to the first time, stabbing pain, except it was coming more from my back, and I couldn't breathe again. So the doctor came in, and I said, like literally it was happening right there, that I felt like like it was happening again, and I can't breathe, I told him, and he said, go get another x-ray, and I'd just gotten one. And I came back, and within the 5 minutes I'd been waiting in the doctor's office, my second lung had collapsed.
Wow.
It was the first moment of real synchronicity in my life, so it was a really spiritual experience, even though it was pretty, kind of traumatic at the same time. But at that point, we went in pretty much the next day and had surgery, because that lung wasn't going to repair itself, because it had collapsed because it was too weak. It had been having to do all the work in compensation for the other. So yeah.